Hello everyone, Silver Contrail here, and once again doing another article aftermath video. This will be the fourth one, I think now. We're doing Spellbooks this week, talking a little bit about my previous article and a little bit about Nationals as well, and kind of looking forward to the rest of my series, what things are going to be like, basically up till the next set release, which is Judgment of the Light, and getting pretty close to a full year of non-stop side deck theory articles, which is pretty crazy to think about. One each week. Yeah, it's been crazy and very frequently some long nights in there trying to meet deadlines. But anyways, this week, unfortunately, I did forget with everything going on to put the link in the script or put the link in the article. So I'll probably put this in the comments as soon as I'm done with this. And I'm trying to finish this up actually before my article goes up. So, yeah, let's talk about last week's article, which was on Spellbooks. Of course, if you went to the qualifier, you probably played against Spellbooks. I know I did. I know my friends did who went with me. We all had fun, or maybe not so much fun, playing against one of the better decks in the game right now, which is definitely Spellbooks. Of course, Spellbooks have their own set of issues. They've got their own weaknesses, and that's what my articles try to address. How do you exploit these weaknesses in games 2 and 3? And of course, if people can take away something from my articles and put that maybe into their main deck, then that's cool too. It's not always going to be strictly side deck cards. There's a lot of tech options, and as a last minute tech update, I hope people found that interesting or helpful. But there were a couple of cards I missed, and some cards that were very, very popular at the YCS. And I would say probably the most talked about card was probably DNA Transplant. And DNA Transplant is just a nutty card. Or, excuse me, DNA Surgery. Transplant changes attributes, surgery changes type. So you play DNA Surgery, and you call something other than Spellcaster, and suddenly all of their monsters have this, or all their monsters become non-spellcasters, and then they're restricted on the spellbooks they can activate. Certain spellbooks requiring them to control a spellcaster monster. So that was a big thing, and even looking at, like, I really like the card. I don't think a lot of people necessarily prepared for it. If I had been citing it, I would have been playing, like, especially in Evil Swarm, it would have been great to have it, flip it, and call Dinosaur. That way you can go into Logia and Dalka more effectively. Logia is really good in the Spellbook matchup. Really freaking good. It's just an awesome card. And Dalka is amazing in the Dragon Ruler matchup because it burns two of their discards. And yeah, they can get that back, but you're going to force them to expend a lot more cards than they would have normally. And that's always great. And it is protected from Big Eye, so that's always nice to have too. And if you can pair it with an Ophion, and maybe then a Logia, you're probably going to win. So, DNA Surgery, really cool card. I didn't mention it at all. I didn't even think about it. I think I thought, like, it came into my mind a couple of days before I sat down to write, and then I just totally forgot about it. Zombie World also is an option, mostly because it's searchable, and that's interesting. And if you're running the terraformings already, maybe it's an option, or if you just want to run the terraforming to get it as quickly as possible. Not a whole lot of decks can exploit it, but Zombie World is actually not too bad against a couple of other decks, even random things like Frog Monarchs. You can throw it up against them, and then they can't tribute, so they can't use their enemy controllers, they can't get their monarchs out, and that restricts their plays. And otherwise, I don't think Zombie World is maybe as good as DNA Transplant. I think DNA Surgery, I keep saying Transplant, The upside to Zombie World might be that it does help you a little bit. I know I couldn't side it. I was running Dragonity, and there was, for obvious reasons, I can't really run a card that turns all my monsters into a certain type, because then I can't summon Vajrayana, I can't summon Gaidarg. So for me, it was out. But if you were playing something else, especially something that could potentially make Logia and Dalka, I think that was something that would be really good to have put in. But it was just something that I missed, and yeah, it was a big deal on the floor. People were talking quite a bit about it. Imperial Iron Wall, was another big one that people were citing already, and then of course Eradicator was huge. Eradicator was a big card. I know if you watched or read the final feature match, I think we can all see how good Eradicator is as a card. And for some people, I think it illustrates something that might be a little bit wrong with this game. That's a discussion for another time. But there's something to say about Eradicator. There's something worth saying about how one card just completely decimates an opposing deck, which happens way too frequently in this game. And it's tough to figure out, do you place the blame on these very linear decks that revolve around very specific strategies, or do you place the blame on cards that completely change game mechanics or have such a devastating effect that it prevents the opponent from playing against them? Maybe it's both. But anyways, another card, Curse of Darkness, was suggested, which burns them for 1,000 every time they activate a spell card. The 1,000 burn itself, I don't think is a big deal. But, obviously, I guess if you're going to play something like Chain Burn, you'd want to run Curse of Darkness. It's just awesome against them. The burn, they're not gonna burn themselves out. They're probably either gonna, especially if it's game 2, they're probably gonna get to an out before they use up maybe half their life points. But what it does is, especially if they go first turn Magician, suddenly you can go try to summon something big and swing over their Magician, which is 400, which has, actually, how much attack does he have? He's got 500 attack. And he'll probably be boosted by Starhall, but you swing over him, and you can potentially OTK right there. If you were able to get a Gaga Cowboy out and then swing into it, you dish out a lot of damage. Or potentially, if you've already siding for Eradicators, you can have something like Malefic Cyber End and just attack into it and win. But those two things do require you to special summon. If they've got the Jowgen, then it's whatever. But if they do that, if you had the Curse of Darkness right away, they probably spent 3k life points. At least, well, actually more like 4k life points even, because they do need to activate another spellbook. So there's that, and I think it might be interesting. Maybe very tentatively, you could pair it with something like Magic Cylinder, but I feel like I'm getting into the realm of casual play when I say that. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. Someone did ask about side deck for frogs, I think, where they can't run the back row cards, and I did say Puppet Plant for that. It's actually pretty cool, especially if you're running Frog Monarchs. You can take their stuff, tribute it, whatever. That's not bad at all. You can, take their Kaiko, swing back into them, banish stuff from their graveyard, which is kind of neat. You can banish their Jowgen so they can't bring it back. Oh, excuse me. And yeah, that's, I think, all the stuff I wanted to hit on. Oh, last thing, something Doug suggested. He was all upset because I didn't mention Anti-Spell Fragrance. And then I told him he said I didn't mention it, and then I told him I actually did, and I got like 4 likes, and I was making fun of him for it while we were in Chicago, but uh, yeah, anti-spell fragrance slows down the deck, and I've talked about it with Prophecy. When I wrote my first article on Prophecy, I did talk about it specifically. I said, hey, if you need to just slow their deck down, like throw something in front of them so they can't do stuff, that's the card you want to use because it's going to slow their pace of play. They can't, like, if you get it first turn, they can't, um, they can't judgment you right away. They have to wait, and they've got to set all their stuff, and then you go Heavy Storm and they lose. I've got to say, like, Heavy Storm is by far the most derp card you can have against that deck because it doesn't run a whole lot of back row protection. So if you've got the OTK and you can get past the Jowgen, just Heavy Storm, or like if you can just Typhoon their fate, a lot of times you're gonna get past them. And in some senses, this is a deck that's doing really good because Typhoon is at 1. Or not at 1, but because Typhoon isn't played in the main deck. Like if I feel that if Typhoon was a 3 of in most of these decks, Prophecy would be struggling a lot more than it is right now because you'd open up, you'd go Typhoon on their 1 or 2 set cards and then go off, and you can do all that stuff, potentially getting past their setup because you've got that option on hand. So there's that. Um, and yeah, I think that's probably everything I need to mention for spellbooks. And we are at, where are we at? Okay, we're at almost 12 minutes. So I think the last thing I want to mention. Yeah, we'll just go straight to that. So, of course, as we move forward with these articles, I'm going to be hitting up more casual-oriented decks. Hopefully that doesn't end up boring people or seeming redundant. Because right now we're kind of at this weird stagnating point where there's not a whole lot going on, except for like locals. And we've got a new set coming out. We just had Number Hunters come out, which Crazy Box being probably the most interesting card there. Well, 74, actually 74 might be more interesting because there are a lot of decks that can make it, and that actually goes against a lot of the cards that are being run right now because people aren't running stuff like Bottomless Trap Hole, Mirror Force Trunks Tribute as often. They're switching them out for things like Breakthrough Skill and Compulsory, and this is a card that just says no to both of those. It's an out to them, and then it destroys things. And it's great against dragons. It's great in dragons as well. I really like the card. It's really good. I'm trying to pick one up for my Mega Phantom Beasts because they're going to be really nice with it. And the deck just cranks out 7s like it's nothing. I already get my Sky Palace for them. But that's going to change some things, I think. The rest of the set is kind of meh. I don't think it's going to do a whole lot. And so as we go forward, yeah, probably I'm thinking like maybe Laval next, because that's a new deck that I really didn't talk about. Like, how do you side deck against Laval? The weird thing is when I talk about stuff like this, it's always like, well, who's actually playing it? And it's not a whole lot of people, but I need something to talk about in terms of decks. Otherwise, I'm going to start talking about specific single cards, maybe groups of cards, trying to get stuff together. Of course, next week, this next week, I'm going to be writing about. Oh, what was it? Oh, yes, the national qualifier side decks, which we'll talk about. I'll have to take some more look at once we get the deck lists up, like what people were running in their main decks, what they're running in their side decks. I've got a pretty good idea because I did see a lot of things, but I want to see what was on the top table exactly, crunch some numbers, that sort of thing. And that should be pretty fun. That should give us some ideas on where to go from here. Of course, the format's going to be quite a bit different going forward. Suddenly Eradicator is able to be played in just about everything. And, additionally, we've got number 74 that's running around. And that's going to change how things work. It's going to change how people pick their main deck options, with dragons being basically the biggest deck in the game right now. I don't really think there's a whole lot of dispute between dragons and spellbooks. It's just spellbooks are so easy to side against. It's ridiculous. I think my entire side deck could go in against Spellbooks. I was citing Horus, the Black Flame Dragon, actually. But there's that. So yeah, that's gonna go. It's gonna be a lot harder for Prophecy players, but it's still gonna. I mean, it's still not gonna be like an easy win matchup. They're gonna have a lot harder matchups across the board. But assuming you don't get that EV turn first turn, or you don't get your Droll first turn, it's still a really strong deck. So there's that too. It's very consistent. Very consistent. Drawing into your side deck card's not as consistent, so that's something to keep in mind. If you're still losing to Prophecy, it may be because you're just not consistently drawing into your side deck cards. Yeah, I would, if I was a Prophecy player, I'd be looking at how to play around these cards. I would start looking to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, we got to stop losing to Eradicator. I don't know how you pull it off. But you just got to, if you want to keep playing those cards, yeah, it's tough because the deck is so good as it is, but it's so linear. And it's like, if you don't want to play that linear build, you might as well just not play it at all. But maybe we'll see some innovation with it. That would be nice. I would like to see something that isn't just turboing into spellbook cards. Maybe the world will see play. Who knows? After the list, whatever could happen, and we'll see more stuff from spellbooks. So I think that's about it for today, this week. And then next week, of course, we'll be talking about the not the YCS, but the WCQ and some of the top level decks that showed up there. And for my regular channel subscribers, I'm waiting on texture pack updates, and there should be more Minecraft on the way, with more server updates on the way. Getting pretty close to having that be completed. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and until next time then.